The other day I put out a video that included this graph of a sudden and very large spike in first-time jobless claims. I thought today it might be worthwhile to dig a little deeper into this story to show the divide between the people who are bearing the full brunt of these layoffs and those at the top who are making the layoff decisions. After all, if we're now entering the fourth turning, where all faith is lost in institutions, it's worthwhile to explore some of the causes of the anger that is starting to come to a boil. Just this past Monday, CNBC wrote a piece discussing a recent Challenger Gray and Christmas survey of U.S. employers. The basic gist of the story is that about half of the companies are considering layoffs in the face of the slowdown in business activity. It is estimated that in the U.S., 47 million jobs could be lost, which will send the unemployment rate up to 32%. This is much higher than the 6.6 million initial jobless claims that I showed on my previous slide. So things are projected to get much, much worse. The story also cites Macy's as an example because Macy's has already announced actions, whereas the Challenger Gray and Christmas survey is merely an informal survey of corporations to see what they are thinking about doing. So let's look at the Macy's story a little bit more in detail. A quick internet search came up with a Washington Post article about Macy's. It seems they are furloughing 125,000 employees. Just in case you're not familiar with the word furlough, it means a temporary layoff after which you might be called back to work but are not guaranteed to be called back. During a furlough, the employee receives no pay. But I wanted to focus on what this article says about the executives. As is normally the case, the big news outfits try to highlight the heroic actions of our corporate CEOs. It says here that executives will take temporary pay cuts and that the CEO is foregoing pay until the crisis subsides. Wow, what a generous thing to do. At least that's what we're supposed to think. That he's going to be working and not getting paid for his efforts. But you, my subscribers, are not ever content just to take a shallow look at the information on the surface. Let's dig a little deeper and see what this gentleman is actually sacrificing. The AFL-CIO has this nifty little website here that allows a person to look up CEO compensation. I highly recommend you play around with it when you have a chance, especially if you work for a publicly traded company and want to look up your own CEO's compensation. Let's take a look at Jeff Genette's compensation to get the full picture. Aha! So we can now see that Jeff Genette's total compensation for 2019 was $12.7 million. Of this, $1.3 million was his salary. This is about 10% of his total compensation package. The rest came from other forms of compensation. He received $4.7 million in company stock, $2.9 million in stock options, and about $3.7 million in non-equity incentive plan compensation. Then there was about $160,000 in other compensation that seems trivial by comparison, but for your common everyday person, $160,000 would be a pretty nice salary to have. So what does it mean that Jeff Genette is going to forego compensation during the crisis? Basically what it means is that he will not be paid his straight-line salary. A couple of months of straight-line salary is about $200,000. And who knows if he made an agreement with his compensation board that he'd still receive it at the end of the year as additional bonus to compensate him for his heroic efforts to save Macy's. The rest of his compensation he will not be giving up. He'll still get his stock, he'll still get his stock options and non-equity-based incentive plan pay, but he gets to look really good in the press, and he can tell the workers that he's furloughing that, like them, he won't be getting paid, but that, unlike them, he still has to come to the office and work. Notice at the bottom here that this CEO's total compensation package is 582 times that of the median worker at Macy's. If we divide $12.7 million by 582, we will see that the median worker's pay at Macy's is about $22,000. It's really difficult to make ends meet on $22,000 in the U.S., especially if you live in a big city. Think those workers are going to miss a few months' pay? Absolutely. Think Jeff Genette is going to miss a couple $100,000? Probably not at all. So before we shed a tear for the sacrifice Mr. Genette is making, let's be sure to know the facts. Now, lest you think that 582 times the median worker's salary is uncharacteristic of corporate America, let me show you how total executive compensation compares against median worker pay for some of the more generously compensated executives. Here I present to you the 52 most generously compensated corporate executives in the U.S. Elon Musk here is an example of just how absurd things can get. He is compensated more than 40,000 times that of his median workers. How anyone can admire this guy, much less own shares of his company, is beyond my comprehension. But I digress. You can see that in every case here, the CEO is compensated more than 800 times what the median employee earns. In some cases, the CEO is compensated many thousands of times what a median employee earns. And don't forget, these people also derive compensation by sitting on the executive boards of other companies. So as you browse through this table, I just wanted to say a few things. As we get through the next few months, there are going to be people who are going to be asked by corporate leaders to make sacrifices. They are going to be significantly harmed financially for the sake of corporate profits. The corporate leaders are going to try to weave a story that makes it look like they are doing everything that they can and that they themselves are sacrificing a lot. In a world where information such as this is readily available, the stories that the CEOs weave will ring hollow, and many, many people are going to get really, really pissed off. I do believe that we are now entering into the fourth turning. March will likely be viewed in hindsight as the beginning of the crisis window. The anger of the common man and woman has been simmering for a while, but with no clear understanding of where to direct that anger. I think when everything starts to boil over, the target for everyone's anger will be pretty easy to identify.